Welcome to the Audio Engineering Podcast with me, Streaky, and
me, Shay.
Now, I might sound a little bit despondent because Shay and I have usually doing this via Skype with each other, but this week we decided to sit in the same room, and because I'm a mastering engineer and not a sound engineer, I forgot to press record on the thing, and so we did a 25-minute podcast to ourselves. So this is take 2. Now Shay's in control of the record button. Yeah. Today we're going to discuss cheap gear versus expensive gear, and well, do you need gear or not? Do you need gear? So my thing is that for mastering, I need expensive equipment. And the reason why, it's not the fact that I just buy it because it's expensive. The fact is that a lot of it is either bespoke or they're not selling many units of it. So it's not like it's, I don't know, Mackie or Behringer or whoever, and they're selling thousands and thousands, and they've got a big production line running in China. These are guys in sheds making boxes. So Masalek, for example, Leif runs out of his sort of house, bangs boxes together all day. That's what he does. I think he sales a lot as well these days. But
to order though, isn't it? It's like a to order thing. Like
most
it's
of
not
it
a production line.
That's exactly right. So there's, some of the equipment that I use personally is more production line, but even things like prism converters, they're only making a certain amount of them. There's only a certain amount of people that are buying this stuff. It's in the thousands, but it's not in the hundreds of thousands. So the price of the components are expensive. They've got to make a markup. The dealer's got to make a markup. There's middlemen. By the time it gets to me or us, should I say, it's expensive stuff. So the reason why I need this sort of stuff is just so that it can sound as posh as possible and as clean as possible. So it hasn't got as much, it hasn't got any noise. The components are expensive. They're well made. You can have a personal relationship with the guys that are making it. So you can have tweaks done, mods. That's kind of where I'm at. And so I really don't want to add anything possible to the sound that I'm producing for somebody. If somebody's giving me a mix, hopefully I can send it back totally clean. It hasn't even been through my stuff, but if it has, I don't want to add loads of artifacts that don't need to be there. I don't want to add a load of noise or anything that's going to change the sound of the mix that I haven't wanted to do. So everything has to be super clean and transparent, and if it is adding sound or warmth, then that's coming from tubes, and that's because that's the sound that I wanted to add to it, not just because I've got a compromise because it's just a poorly cheap made bit of equipment. When it comes to speakers, I personally, my thing is always, whether you're in the box as a mix engineer or whatever, is buy the most expensive speakers that you can afford. Again, that's because a lot of them are small run stuff, but if you can hear what you're doing, that's more important than any bit of equipment that you can buy. So that should be your main priority, personally. That and your room. So you've got to be able to hear what you're doing to then make it justified to buy any equipment, good or bad. So my thing would be, I would always try and spend the most I could on a pair of speakers. And it is down to price, unfortunately. Yeah. It's not the fact that you're just paying for, it's not like it's made in China on a production run like Gucci or something, where it's, they're making exactly the same thing and it goes out the back door, or Apple or whatever. These are just small run little businesses that make bespoke speakers for the music industry. So, but, so that's me for mastering really, but Shay for what he's doing is totally different really.
Yeah, like for production, mixing, I went through a stage a while ago when I first sort of started out, when I left university, I went through a stage of having to buy a lot of cheap gear. One, to fill the racks up to make it look good when people walked in. And like you were saying earlier, like does it actually look that good? Or is it just us thinking that the person coming in? Yeah.
It's ego. But then the fact is, people do think that, because I think there's a lot of times where, how many of these big mix studios now need their SSL? Right? They don't, do they? Because most people are just running through it. Yeah, okay, some people will bus out to it and whatever. Yeah. But they're not using every channel. They're not recalling in the same way that they used to. So the main reason these studios have got these big desks is because it looks good. They can charge more because the client feels that they've made it in the music industry. Because
it looks good. It looks professional. They've got racks of gear everywhere. I mean, not using any of it. Like, I don't think I've been to a studio and worked in a studio that's got like a big desk in it, an analog desk, and gone through all of the racks of gear. There's maybe one or two, and it's normally like a mic pre. Do you know what I mean? That you're tweaking, that gets used hard.
You're more in those studios for the actual room. They'd be better off getting some great sounding. Like, ideally, what they want is a room that's got amazing speakers, amazing acoustics, spend all their money on that.
Yeah, and conversion. Bin
off the massive SSL, get a small little summing
box,
like a little, or a little Neve or something. You know those little Neve broadcast desks? Something like that. They're just fucking great sounding. And just channel strips, things like that. Just like real bespoke little rooms where people can go in and mix.
Even that now, you don't even need the channel strips with how plugins are and how things are. You can get the sound of something. Like when we were talking before, there's no one listens to a track and goes, God, that SSL channel strip sounds amazing on that vocal. No one cares. No one knows. It wasn't written down, and like that. You don't get like anymore. You don't get like a sleeve with who you did this through. Do you know what I mean? Like in old records and vinyls, you used to get a little write up of who did what and everything like that, and it was part of getting the record. Where now you get it off iTunes or streaming it somewhere. You don't get any information on how it was made.
Yeah,
and it's no one cares. Do you know what I mean? Like,
also these big mix engineers who have got obviously their own SSLs in their home studios, none of them are using their SSLs either.
It's not.
It's ridiculous.
Most of the time nowadays, when I see an SSL, it's just basically like a big laptop stand, isn't it?
Yeah.
They've got this sliding thing that goes across it, like blanking the whole thing, so you can put your laptop on it. Yeah. So what's the point of it being there? It would be better to have nothing, but in order to have nothing in the room, all of the bits that need to be in there, the essential minimal bits, have to cost a lot of money. Like, to get nothing in the room, you need, like you say, great speakers, you need great conversion, you need a couple of really good bits of gear, and that's it.
Yeah, but then that's where I think I've gone through that, if I'm honest. When I first started at Battery years ago, I used to have things like Aphex Dominators and all kinds of nonsense. I remember Leif coming in from Masalek and looking at me, going back, and him saying, "What do you use that for?" And I was like, "It's amazing. It's really good on the bass, things like that." And he must have looked at me and just thought, "You dick, what are you doing?" I mean, it did. At the time, I thought it was great, and there were certain things, but. I didn't really need it. You just need a few bits of really good equipment. I always say, from a mastering point of view, have one EQ, one compressor, learn those like the back of your hand, get the best ones you can, the generalist best ones you can, get some brilliant converters, and you're away. Yeah. Everything else is gravy, really, but it's like, you don't actually need anything.
No, like in production, when I was mixing, I went through a stage of buying anything cheap. Like I was on eBay every day, and all I'd type in was compressor and see what came up, like audio compressor. And anything that was cheap, like sub £100, I put a bid in for it. And I was getting, like, every week I was getting a couple of compressors. I had like two 3630 Alesis compressors, two DBX 266XL compressors, really cheap, second hand, really like bat in bad condition. Yeah. But one to fill up the rack. Yeah, it filled up the rack, and it made the rack. It make you, when people come in, it makes you look like you know what you're doing. But it was all I was doing was tweaking little bits. But I used to buy little Mackie Tapco desks.
But you'll never get to learn those bits of equipment well enough, because all you're doing is buying and selling equipment all the time.
Yeah, I mean, saying that, the compressors I knew inside out, because I would use them for the sake of using them on everything, but only for sort of sound design purposes. Yeah. So I'd run soft synthesizers. I didn't have hardware synths at the time. Like soft synths out of the computer into a rack of analog gear that was cheap, but it was still analog equipment, and just literally just
play around with it until you get a sound going.
Yeah, obliterate, just like crush it through these compressors, and just to get an edge to it, and then overdrive it through like a 4-channel really rubbish mixer.
But you could do a lot of that in the box now.
Nowadays you can, yeah.
So you don't need to go through a load of gear.
No. I mean, I could have done it in the box then as well, but it looked better to have loads of gear, and it was like an obsession, like a hobby. I needed loads of bits of gear.
But some of those sounds, though, when you're coming from the source, a lot of those sounds, by you going through all that gear and that, sometimes, I know it like messes the sound up and ruins it a bit, but a lot of the time it kind of ruins it too much and takes away some of the
Source.
the loveliness
Yeah.
of the source
Yeah.
in the first place. I remember when I used to do that, and you end up with a terrible sound. Where if you'd just gone through a couple of things
Or
and
nothing.
and
Yeah.
messed with it a bit, you end up with a
Yeah.
much better source sound. I'm not talking from the fact of better as in what it's doing, but better as in the harmonics that are in it, the stuff that you lose by going through all these different process boxes.
I posted a picture a while ago, a few days ago now, of my old setup, which was the day I finished building the studio that I was making. I mean, it's maybe 5-6 years ago now, like just finished building it. And it was full of gear, racks, 2 full 12U racks, full of gear, mixing desk, 3 sets of monitors, everything. It looked really good. I have none of that gear anymore. Literally, I have not one piece of equipment, and that was what the picture was like. I have none of this anymore. This is all gone. And now I've got a meter wide desk.
Do you feel less professional for that?
Not at all. In a way, I feel more productive having less stuff.
Yeah, right.
And I got rid of all of the cheap stuff and bought a couple of not dumb expensive things, but things that were a bit more expensive and a bit more nicer, should I say, and just worked out my workflow. Like, got rid of the stuff that I didn't use every day. And ended up, because I didn't miss it.
I've done the same.
Yeah, there's no need for me to have 13 compressors.
I don't want anything that I don't use most of the time.
Every day, yeah.
If I haven't used it in the last month, don't bother having it.
Yeah, like if I could get away with it, I would just have a laptop and a set of speakers, but you can't. You need to have a converter. So I went and bought a sort of not high end, but good converter, whereas before I was using the converter in a desk, which was kind of good, but it was nowhere near what this one was.
Yeah.
And then once I'd got that, I was like, right, okay, I've got a nice set of speakers, I've got a nice converter.
But really, that is what you need.
Yeah.
Going back to what I was saying earlier, great room, great speakers, great converter. These are all the things that you should have, especially if you're in the box. You need get the best converter you can buy. How much is that? $2,000.
Yeah,
right?
About $2,500.
Spend another few grand on a set of speakers.
If you've got a $5,000 budget to hear stuff with, you're going to do really well. You're going to get.
You need a $5,000 budget.
Yeah, you'd need a $5,000 budget to go that high end, and then to
go
get
any
rid of
end.
everything. Well, yeah.
To go any end, you need $5,000.
In order to get rid of everything,
borrow $5,000.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't matter how
get yourself a credit card.
Skint you are. $5,000 these days isn't a great deal of money. You can get $5,000 if you really wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, you could just go and get 2 credit cards, $2,500 limit each, start that easily, and
whatever.
then you've got it.
But you can get yourself then a great set of speakers, a D2A, and some stuff for your room to make it sound good.
And get rid of all of the unnecessary.
Get rid of all of the nonsense that you've been paying £100 for.
See, like, I think as well, if you want really nice gear and you want that high end sound and you want to have that extra, go that extra mile with the gear, go down the sort of the boutique-y route or like the custom route of something, like where you go to a company that is a one-off person that makes custom things. You go to them and you say, I want a mid-side EQ, or I want a...
Yeah, but I always think that if you do that, I've done that before, and I think that if you don't know what you're listening to, or you haven't got the right listening environment, you'll probably end up with something that's rubbish. You need to know what you're doing, is what I'm saying. It's like, you need to know, okay, well, I want this, and the reason why I want it this way, and the reason I want these. And also, I mean, you know about this stuff because you've built equipment, but you need to know about the different, how things sound, like what tubes sound a certain way, and why you have, like, I don't know because I don't build equipment, but, you know, certain ICs, is it, and things like that.
Yeah, I mean,
like
different capacitors and things like that, different manufacturers of things.
So you need to know all that stuff to know. Otherwise, you can go somewhere, then go, yeah, okay, there's a box.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're going to someone and you're going to a bespoke guy and you're saying, right, I want a tube mid-side EQ, that straight away they know you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You can say to them, I want this kind of sound.
But it's going to cost you a lot of money.
It'll cost you a lot of money, but it won't be as expensive. It won't be anywhere near as expensive as going and buying like a Masalek EQ,
because
you're going to a
compressor.
Exactly, yeah. You're getting something that is completely custom to you, and it's yours. Like, I mean, if you can work a soldering iron, you can buy kits nowadays that talk you through it, and you put in the best components that you can. Like, it takes a little bit of research.
Yeah, I haven't got time.
So, well, yeah. The only reason I had time was because it was a uni project. But at the time, I knew nothing about any of it, and it's just a little bit of research.
It's quite a nice learning curve to do as well.
I mean, it not just from the fact of knowing how to build something, but understanding why certain gear is so expensive and why certain valves are more sought after in sound than other ones are, and things like that. And then when you see the expensive gear and you look at what components are in it, You're like, okay, that's why it's that expensive. And then you look at a Behringer compressor and you're like, aha, that's why it's cheap. Yeah, that's why it's that cheap.
Because and that's why it sounds a certain way, because you understand what goes into it.
But those cheap things, those cheap bits, EQs, compressors, they have their uses still, but they don't have their uses in high end. When you come to the mastering stage,
or mixing.
I mean, even mixing, if you're creative mixing, if you're just doing balancing and things like that, and you're doing the final stage of the mix, no,
you might as well stay in the box.
Yeah, but because it's just pure clean.
Plugins are going to sound much better.
Yeah, and you've got a clean way. But if you're doing sort of like in building, you get first fix in it, where like you put all the first bits in.
Yeah.
When you're doing the mix, it's like the first fix of the mix when you're just getting still that creative side of it.
Where you think, right, I'm going to have these vocals resung.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to have to tune this, sort that, chop all the bass drums up. Do like you're basically
you're
producing.
You're helping the last stage of production. Yeah. When you're at that sort of stage with it, and you're thinking like, oh, those drums they could do with a bit more beef. I'm going to take this really rubbish compressor or not rubbish, but really cheap compressor and cheap 4-channel mixing desk,
because I know
slam
the sound
it in parallel. I know the sound of it. Slam it, have it in parallel, and you're like, wow, that sounds really good. And so it has its uses, but you wouldn't go and like stem one of the stems out and do some parallel compression with a with a Behringer. It's not happening.
No,
you're better off just running it through 2 or 3 bits of really nice gear, a compressor, an EQ, maybe a limiter in the analog world, and just really good conversion. Yeah. But in order to get in order to get rid of things, the things that you keep or the things that you replace them with have to be expensive and have to be high end. Like you can't have a minimal setup with a set of like 5-inch rockets.
No.
Do you know what I mean?
No.
A cheap EQ, which is what I did for a long time. Like I was mastering people's records when I first left.
But you can't hear what you're doing on that sort of stuff.
No, not at all. All I was doing was going by what I'd learned and looking at meters more than anything, and then just trying to compensate what I was hearing to what the meter was doing. Whereas if I'd have not bought all the rubbish gear and just bought a really good set of speakers, had a perfect environment to do it in a converter, I wouldn't have to compromise. I wouldn't have to do that balancing act with like what I can see and what I can hear, because it's just straight away what I can hear. Does it sound good? Yes, fine, done. Rather than I think it sounds all right. Let's go to the car. I think right. Let's get that meter up. What is that meter saying compared to that one? And the whole time you're second guessing yourself. Whereas when you spend that money and you get a really good set of speakers, lovely converter, there's no second guessing. It's right or wrong. Yeah,
for me the thing is if you think you have to test it a lot, then don't do it.
There's no point doing it.
If you think, this EQ, how does that sound? Is it a good EQ or is it a bad EQ? Well, if you think that, then bin the EQ because it should sound better.
Yeah, but I'm seeing a lot of producers as well at the moment spending a lot of money on monitoring. And just literally getting rid of everything. The only real stuff that they have anymore is sound source stuff like synthesizers.
Yeah,
where everything else
there's
is
a massive market now in the Nearfield and midfield range speakers. I'm demoing some all the time because it's something that I'm interested in audio and how things sound. And there's so many people bringing out different stuff now that it's going to get cheaper, surely, to get better quality speakers.
And the thing is, the quality is going to get higher and higher, and the price is going to go further down. But the problem you'll have with that is the engineers that are B&W, PMC, ATC. Do you know what I mean? Like now you've got all these other brands coming out. It's hard for those brands to.
I don't think some of those big brands, like I'm not a fan of. I've worked on PMCs most of my career, but I'm just not a fan of their stuff. I think their stuff's also superly overpriced. I don't understand how that's going back to expensive stuff. Mm-hmm. Paying $100,000 for a set of speakers. They don't sound like $100,000 to me.
That's what I'm saying. That was kind of what I mean. Like it's bad in a way that all these new companies coming out, they're making amazing sounding things, like especially speakers. They're making great sounding speakers, but they haven't got because they're new companies. They haven't got the heritage and the brand. Yeah, exactly. The hype around them. All these big engineers. So like, it might be a case where engineers are a bit funny about pioneering these brands because they don't have that.
Kudos.
Yeah, they don't have that backstory about them so much. They're too new. When really, in actual fact, they're probably 10
and
times better.
that goes back to the rubber stamp thing again of ego and someone coming in the room and going, oh,
what are they?
What are those things you're working on? I'm so used to seeing, especially for mastering, I'm so used to seeing PMCs or BMWs.
I thought it's a mastering room. Like,
yeah.
Well, it is. Does it sound good? Sweet. Like I say, you don't listen to a record and go, sure, those PMCs did that engineer well. No one cares.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? No one knows.
No
one. Does it sound good or not? You could have PMCs and get a horrendous sound.
Trust me, I've done it.
But do you know what I mean? It's like you still need to know what you're doing with it.
Well,
and if you click with a set of speakers, if you like them, that should be...
That's exactly it.
It's
whether those speakers work with the room and work... Because PMCs can sound brilliant in the right room, but can sound absolutely appalling. When I worked at Soundmasters for years, we had a set soffit mounted into the walls.
Oh, yeah.
BB5s, expensive speakers, sounded dreadful. I think I've mentioned it before, where someone had screwed them into the wall so that they'd stay in. Yeah. And so basically the whole wall became a speaker
panel.
And it was just ridiculous. And they were pointing downwards across a big flat desk.
No, the whole room was
the whole thing just sounded just appalling. That's not PMC's fault, but if the room's crap...
Well, like the old BMWs you had that were in your older room, and they were amazing sounding. They sounded really good. Whereas when I had them for a little bit in my room, they sounded nothing like that at all. They still sounded really good, but they did not sound anything
totally
like they sounded in the other room.
That's
and it's the same speakers, but it was down to the amp again that you're using. You got to think about it. Like if you're getting passive speakers, it's the amp that you got to use.
Cables.
The cables, the length of the cable, the thickness of the cable.
Yeah, and
like you went through a stage of buying, what was it, those LAT cables?
Yeah, LAT. They've gone skint now.
Have they?
Yeah, but I've still got loads of those leads.
Sell them back to
They're amazing leads. Yeah, but I was buying mains leads for 250 quid a metre. Which is mental, but they sound.
It all adds to the sound.
It does all add. It's all those little things.
Yeah, but then again, it's like, are they?
But I'm into that. Things? But you need to be able to hear that. So there's no point in buying yourself 250 quid lead if your speakers are rubbish and you can't hear what you're doing. Yeah, because you're not going to hear the difference.
And if the environment that they're in is cluttered, if you've got a cluttered environment full of unnecessary
rubbish, so much
rubbish,
nicer when everything's clean and tidy.
Yeah,
less equipment. The more I don't use things, the more I'm selling stuff. I want just hardly any equipment. I just want the basics of what I use, basic speakers. I don't want loads of stuff.
Yeah, like I said, my work environment now is a metre wide desk. That's it. I've got a metre wide of desk, and everything is in front of me where it needs to be, and then everything around me is just free, open space.
Yeah, I don't know if I've told this story before, but when I worked at Battery, I spoke to Chris Parmenides, who's at Unity Mastering now, and he was reminding me of one day, because we had been having a conversation like this, talking about desks and all that, and I had a desk that was sitting it was a tiny room, but I had a desk sitting at the front of the room, and it had the speakers sitting on top of the desk. And so I decided that evening I was going to chop the desk up. So I sawed the desk in half while everyone had left. And there was a skip out the front, so I banged it in the skip, put the two speakers on some stands at the front, and put all my equipment in a rack in the middle. Came back in the morning, everyone's like, "What's your desk doing in the thing?" And I had to go in and see the boss and all that. It was just mental. I don't know what I was thinking. They were mental at me. But it was, again, that thing where I'd basically stripped out the whole room to nothing, gone with just a set of speakers and a little desk in the centre of the room. Perfect. It sounded so much better than having them mounted on the desk, which was vibrating all over the place. And I was sitting far too close. I wasn't in the V. It was just like the worst setup. So it was the best thing I did, but try and explain that to your boss.
Yeah. It's the efficiency as well, like the least amount of stuff that you have. If you've got like 2 or 3 bits that are a good amount of money, or not just because they're expensive, but they are expensive for a reason.
And you know that they sound the way you want them to sound.
Yeah, your efficiency, your work rate is going to be so much better. Like for production-wise, I love the fact that I had loads of gear when I was starting. There was stuff everywhere and I had options, but options is not efficient. Like the more options you have and the more variables that can go on is time wasted. If you're doing sound design, waste as much time as you want. But when you're actually like, you've got something that you need to make and get done, when you've got 3 compressors on your left, 4 on your right, and EQ, distortion units, mixing.
Well, everyone likes feeling like they're at the Starship Enterprise desk, don't they? Spinning around, giving it a large. Yeah,
but again, it's like the ego thing. Like, they
pop your ego away for 5 minutes.
Like an artist that's coming, you don't ever get another engineer come to your studio to work on tracks. Do you know what I mean? It's like you're the engineer. Yeah, the artist doesn't care. They walk in, oh wow, great, let's sing. Let's just do what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
Like I used to always like hoover up, make sure everything was crisp, all the gears on, all the lights are on when people walk in. They walk in like they don't care. Do you know what I mean? It was me that cared about it. It was me that cared about the vision of when people walk in, what it looks like.
Yeah.
When most of the time they probably didn't care. It was just me. It was what I wanted to portray myself as. It needs to look pro. Rather than at the end of it, it still could have sounded horrendous.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
But then going on to that, what is pro then these days? It's like if you've got all these big mix engineers and big ones I'm talking about, they're in rooms mainly at their houses.
Nowadays, yeah, it's a big thing as
They
well.
don't want to be in a big studio.
Yeah.
No one wants to be in a big studio anymore. No one wants to have to go to the big, get used to that room. They just want to go and mix all the time quickly in a room they know and get on with it. And they're all working from small little studios.
Or or like home studios or home setups. Like loads of people I know use garages.
Yeah.
I use a garage. Like it's your home. Do you know what I mean? If there's anything that ever needs done, you're there to do it. You haven't got to travel into the city to get it done.
Yeah.
It's hard to
and
pay someone
pay
else.
for all the space.
Exactly.
And all that
You've got to
stuff.
pay for the rent for it. Then you've got to make sure that when you're not there, your gear's safe.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're at home and it's a space that you know and you can be in whenever you want to be in it.
So, and these are top professionals. These aren't just.
You see it a lot in the music for film, like engineers that mix music for film. They've got like an annex or like a little bit like what was the living room.
Yeah,
converted. And it's got like a nice little digital desk in there for like film and stuff, you kind of need a desk. But like
but like a barn in the garden.
Exactly, something where you feel comfortable to be in, really.
Yeah.
And again, it's down to the expense thing. Like you're coming down on the amount of money you have to spend just for the vision or like the aesthetic that we're here. We're at this place where no one cares. Like you could be at that place and get horrendous music.
Well, listen, look at how when you were working at Metrophonic. Is it
Zenomania? Close.
Yeah. But that was like, explain what that was like.
I mean, they were churning out like pop bands.
Yeah, but you had like 3 floors.
3 floors. It was a house. It was 3 floors, and it was every single room in the house was converted to a small little set-up studio. And again, the gear was good. They had really good microphones.
Yeah, but just like exactly what you needed, nothing more, nothing less. Yeah. Just right. Okay, this is a vocal room that we record vocals in,
and it felt like home. That. Yeah, when I went to work, it didn't feel like I was going to work. I was going to someone's house. I mean, it was a huge.
Yeah, but you're working on
house.
And you've got big artists coming in.
Yeah.
So you've got Girls Aloud coming in.
Girls Aloud, Saturdays, The Wanted were there, Gossip, loads
pop
of different
stuff,
bands.
big bands.
Yeah.
Big labels paying for this time.
Yeah.
And they're not going to big studios in London. They're going to a house in where it was miles away, wasn't it?
It was in Kent. I mean, they're not in Kent anymore. It's not the house anymore. It's not the house.
Right.
But it was in Kent, like Westerham it was. Really nice, massive house, big grounds.
Just like a factory of
It was
music.
a factory. It was like a production factory. And but the thing was, you didn't feel...
And he's upstairs getting...
He's at the other side of the, the other side of the house.
So just for anybody listening, how they can... So you've got a guy upstairs or the other part of the house, you're recording stuff, feeding them into a hard drive. He's then picking through, listening to stuff, going, I like the verse on that, I like the line on that, that singer's better for that one. Mm-hmm. And it's basically piecing a song together.
Yeah, with little puzzle pieces.
From a load of guys like you recording all the different people in all the different rooms at the same time.
Yeah.
And just feed them in. You've got songwriters there writing songs at the same time.
You've got producers. Like I'd be recording a vocalist, and then I'd have a writer to my right sat on the couch, just making tweaks and writing extra verses. And then 3 foot away from me in another room, I've got a producer that's working on the bridge part. And it was like a big family. It didn't feel like you're at work because it was a house. I could go downstairs and make a cup of tea in a house. Like I'd sit at the dinner table and eat lunch with like the band members and that.
Yeah.
And it was more the band members as well when they were there. It was like they were at home. They didn't feel like they were at a studio.
Yeah.
But all the gear, again, it was minimal amount of gear. It wasn't like racks and desks. And
no, just needed what you needed.
Yeah, you had a mic pre, a microphone, and a Mac. And that was it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? The producer, if you're a producer there, they had the bare minimum stuff that was needed, a MIDI controller and a Mac. If you wanted to bring your own gear, you bring it. It's fine. But they had really good mics. They had lovely converters, lovely mic pre's, and that was it.
Yeah.
And then the efficiency of it was so much quicker.
But that's what it's about.
If I was there and every single room had an SSL desk in it, how much time would I spend?
Oh, be fannying forever.
I mean, I worked at a studio where it was...
And how much would it cost to set that up?
It's too much.
And no one would use it.
I know. They had an SSL and they got rid of it.
Yeah.
That's why it used to be called the SSL room, and they just got rid of it. And there's no need for it. They got a couple of mic pre's, done. No need for it. But yeah, I mean, I worked at a studio where it was an SSL duality desk, and for an hour, I'd have to get there an hour before the session to recall the desk, get the settings up, everything. Oh, do you know what I mean?
Don't bother.
And then talking to the geezer about it at the time, like before I got the job, I was reading through the manual for it. Yeah, exactly. Like just so I knew how the desk worked, and like having to show the person that owned the desk, like that you can press that button. Do you know what I mean? You can. This works like that, and it's 15 minutes there. He's never used it. And it's 15 minutes there, just explaining what this bit does.
But do you think you get more work from that?
I think you would used to back in the day. 10 years ago, yes. 15 years ago, 100%.
Definitely, yeah.
Now, where you've got low latency everything, and you've got plugins that mimic real old style gear, plus plugins that are just above and beyond anything that you could do now, like that you could do 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You don't need it. All you need now is a MacBook, and like you say, a really nice, expensive set of speakers, true response speakers. And
so if you're somebody looking at a studio now, you've got to be looking at somebody's CV, basically.
What they've done.
Not their studio, their Discog.
Sort of, but again, someone could be really good just coming out of uni with no massive names on their, like if you Wikipedia them or something. Like my Discogs is two things. Do you know what I mean? And it was just the stuff that I did when I was at Xenomania. So you could have someone that's really good that doesn't have that much big name things on it.
Yeah.
And you could have someone that's got loads and loads of names, but it was just because at the time they were in the right place.
Well, it's mainly Discogs, for example, on that site is just mainly record labels anyway. So if you're not doing record label work, then you're not going to be on
exactly.
it. So
if you get on with the person, I think mainly nowadays, for people to pick someone to work on their work, it's do they work with the person? Is the person okay? Not the gear that they're using. Do they get on with that person?
Well, and do they like the sound of what they've done previously?
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean.
It doesn't have to be famous things, but if they listen to it before and after, or the production style of something, or the way it's mixed. I mean, there's a lot of people that I listen to, mastering engineers, where I'll go, okay, I know it's that mastering engineer.
Really?
Yeah, as I'm listening to the track, and then I'll look it up and go, it was that mastering engineer. Yeah. And that's something that you can hear with a lot of people if you've got the right speakers.
Yeah, if you've got the right...
And you can hear, that production style is that. I can tell mix engineers.
Mix engineers, I think, is easier than like a Michael Brower mix. Like that X's and O's, when that came out sort of last year sometime, whenever it did, I listened to it and I was like, that sounds well Browery. That sounds like Coldplay, like do you know what I mean? Massive, thick, super hard, like... And for the type of tune that it was like aggressive and it was like growly. I remember thinking that sounds like a Brower mix. Didn't think anything much of it. And then like 6 months later, it's Michael Brower, how he mixed X's and O's in the video. Right. It's like, you kind of know, you can tell. Yeah.
Yeah, I can, definitely. Mm. But, okay, I think we've rabbited on.
Yeah, let's get going off tangent now. We went into a whole new podcast there, yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for listening. Please subscribe. You can see links to all of our places that we are.
And stuff.
But please subscribe to the thing, and please like it if you did. If you're still here, then thanks for listening. And until next time, cheers, bye.